Hey there, I'm Zoot Java. Today, I'd like to talk about Mike Ward, the comedian, finally winning his court case for free speech after a 10-year battle. But first, could you please just give me a thumbs up and subscribe? Hit that button there. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to post a link to two other video hosting sites for my content because YouTube is coming after me hard. Anyhow, now what happened is in regards to Mike Ward. Mike Ward's a comedian, Canadian comedian, and they have finally in the Supreme Court defended his right to tell jokes. Now, I don't know what's worse, to be quite honest with you. The fact that it took 10 years to finally come to the conclusion that this should be just okay. Like it should have been like a 5-10 minute conversation. However, what bothers me is that there was 9 justices who presided over this, and 4 of them sided against Mike. So in other words, they sided against free speech. Okay, now before the decision was released, it's kind of like all these Canadians out here and comedians in general, they just thought that he had already lost. And the Montreal Gazette even wrote that culturally we celebrate the export of Canadian comedy. Mike Myers, John Candy, and on and on. And now we're a country that has been subjected to getting a comedian, and more importantly, his jokes, 10 years of legal battles, and tens of thousands of dollars of fines, huge amounts of lawyer bills. Okay, now for most of you who are not familiar with the entire story, the case, it just works around these jokes that Mike Ward told in an act about this young kid who was disfigured, and he was singing, and his name was, I'll butcher it if I say it in French, but Jeremy Gabriel. And in 2005, when he was 8 years old, he sang the national anthem at the Montreal Canadiens game, and performed with Celine Dion, and he sang for the Pope. Now, each time, people were saying they were all critical of him singing, like they didn't, I guess they just didn't like his singing and stuff like that, but of all people, Mike Ward was the one who was defending him. They were saying, the kid's gonna die soon. Let him have his dream. Let him sing for the Pope. Let him sing for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, who cares? And the way he did it came out as a joke anyway. But it wasn't nasty or cruel the way that they're complaining about now. So that's when he was 8 years old, and then he turns 13 years old, and Mike decides to use him as part of his act. And you got to bear in mind, this was done at a private act. And when I say private, anyone can go, but you pay money to get in to see the act. Okay? This wasn't something that they taped and put up on the CBC or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation network. It wasn't something that was just put out there for everybody to see. What happened was somebody had videotaped it while they were in the club that night, and then they posted it online, and then somebody decided to go after Mike, and they just posted a snippet of it. And of course, then they get everybody up in arms, and this you know, goes up in flames. Now, even Maclean's magazine decided to, just go after the nasty stuff that he said, which, it was kind of nasty, but he just said that Ward introduced Gabriel as the kid with a subwoofer on his head, and, referring to his hearing aid. He just described defending Gabriel against people who criticized his singing. I was like, come on, he's living his dream. He's dying and he's living his dream. Let him live his dream. He's been dreaming since he was little to sing off key in front of the Pope. He described realizing that Gabriel did not have a terminal illness. He goes, I defended him nonstop, but now it's been 5 years and F word. He's not dead yet. So Mike Ward said, and he's impossible to kill, too. I saw him last summer at the water slides. I tried to drown him. Impossible. So I went on the internet to check what his disease really is. You know what he has? He's effing ugly. Then Ward tells the audience he wasn't sure how far he could take the joke, and kind of chided them for having kept laughing. Now, in 2012, Gabriel's family complained to the Quebec Human Rights Commission, which is a joke. All these human rights commissions that we have across the country are an absolute farce. However, they took Ward to a tribunal, which is no different than a Spanish Inquisition, trust me. And they ultimately ordered him to pay $35,000 in moral and punitive damages to Gabriel and another $7,000 to his mother. The tribunal said that Ward was not concerning himself with the feelings of the victims and their families when he writes jokes, which apparently seemed to be illegal in their eyes. Now, Mike Ward has said, I believe that the total came to $80,000 or $85,000, I believe he said. So I'm really not sure about that, but that's he ought to know. So he had an appeal, and the Quebec Court of Appeal, one of the three judges dissented. The case wound up before the Supreme Court of Canada. So Ward holds the honor of telling Canada's most litigated jokes, as the Gazette article noted. It's the first time a comedian's jokes are being argued before the Supreme Court of Canada. Ridiculous. And, like they said, that this isn't a milestone of which to be proud, especially since it's unlikely to be the last, And even though the Supreme Court has vindicated Ward, it was only narrowly, by just barely scraping by. So, and Ward was on the losing side of every legal battle up until this point. So, some years back, the outrage mob was going after a comedian by the name of Tina Fey for a joke, and it prompted her announcement that she was opting out of explaining and apologizing for jokes. Unfortunately, Mike Ward didn't have the privilege of doing the same thing. The only thing worse than these Twitterati trolls coming after your jokes is the Canadian jurists doing it. And this has nothing to do whether Mike Ward is funny or not, or whether his jokes are in poor taste. None of that matters at all. Now, we shouldn't have to say that being mean, nasty, uncivilized, and not funny, which of course is just up to you. But all of those things in speech, if you want to choose to apply them to the bit that Ward did, and should be synonyms for illegal in a free society, that's absolutely wrong. So, luckily, today's decision, October 29th, 2021, he was found basically not guilty, and that his speech was free. You know, um, oddly enough, the Liberal Party of Canada want to reintroduce a bill that will vastly expand the government's ability to prosecute people for online speech. What a surprise. C-36, as it was known in Parliament previously, they want to reinstate, quote, hate speech, unquote, provisions to the Canadian Human Rights Act, making it a human rights offense to communicate speech, quote, likely to foment detestation and vilification, unquote, online. While the government insists this is only for the very worst expressions of speech, not merely offensive or humiliating speech, such as jokes perhaps, that Ward's comedy has been censured by a Quebec Human Rights Tribunal, and Quebec's Court of Appeal is not a vote of confidence for this. And it's pretty much an unwritten rule that comics should punch up rather than punch down. However, it's hard to come up with lower hanging fruit than a disabled child performer, right? But comic tastes are for comedians and their audience. So courts and tribunals should not be there to sort it out. If comics aren't allowed to slaughter what you would call your sacred cow, then all that's left are bits and pieces that are just, little simple parrot terms, accepted social norms. Hilarious, huh? Stand-up comedy will just be this goody-goody stuff. Things that you could watch on a children's program for 5-year-olds. Which is what Julius Gray, Mike Ward's lawyer, argued before the Supreme Court. As a consumer of stand-up, it's already obnoxious to see how many comedians have been forced to subject their comedy to a level of political and cultural scrutiny that defies the purpose of comedy. It's ushered in a generation of comedians who aren't at all that funny. Unfortunately, the greatest take on this has been from the late, and I mean great, Norm Macdonald, also a Canadian comedian. But previously, he spoke out against comics who seek what he calls applause rather than laughter, because according to Norm Macdonald, he said there's a difference between a clap and a laugh. A laugh is involuntary, but the crowd is in complete control when they're clapping. They say, "We agree with what you're saying. Proceed." So, Norm's right. If you can catch them off guard, that's the whole idea with what you're saying. Doesn't matter what it is. It will cause something within you to laugh. So, nobody should be clapping for this legal system that's capable of stopping you from telling jokes. You may have won this battle, but free speech is just going down the tubes and losing the war that we've got here. What's my take on this? We're in a very sad state, and it's got to stop. We have got to fight back with everything we've got, mainly because what's going on here is we're being judged, we're being carried, we're being given laws that we have to obey, and they're based on everybody's feelings. They're not based on anything at all that makes 100% sense. Because when you base things on everybody's feelings, my feelings are different than your feelings. And your feelings are different from the next person's feelings. You can go into a club to watch a stand-up comedian, and I have done this many times, and I have seen this many times. People laughing all night long, and then all of a sudden the comedian touches upon a subject that they're a little sensitive to, and then they get snotty. You see the way they sit, they cross their arms like this, they get a big frown on their face, they scowl at the comedian. I've seen this happen. And what you should do is, honestly, people, go in there, accept the joke for what it is, a joke, and just go on with your day. Leave. This person is not there making a personal attack at you. Unless, of course, you sat too close to the front and decided to heckle him, then, oh yeah, you're going to face the wrath. But that's the way it's just going to have to be. It should be. You pay to go in and see this person. This is a person who has decided on a way to make people laugh. They're doing it, or else they wouldn't be there. Trust me, the clubs would not have them there. Now, for my bad joke that I'm going to wind this all up with, what's square and hairy? Anyone? A Pubix cube. No, huh? Okay, like I said, like, subscribe, comment, all that great things. And post me on your social media. Get the word out there. And thank you very much. Talk to you later. And have a Java on Zoot.